There was once a Rav who lived a few generations ago. His name was the Apter Rav, otherwise known as the Ohev Yisrael. He was a Jew who loved other Jews. He always talked up Klal Yisrael. And it happened that there was another Jew at the time, a very famous Jew called the Rebbe of Berdichev, of Levi Yitzchok, Berdichev Rav, who had a dream. And in his dream, he envisioned the death of the Apter Rav, who it wasn't known that he died at the time. He just, for some reason, he just had this dream. And he saw that the Apter Rav was taken to Shamayim, and in the process of being taken to heaven, as happens with many, many other great people, heads of the generation, he was taken past the entrance of Gehinnom, past the entrance of the place which is the opposite of heaven, if you get my drift. Why was the Apter Rav taken to the entrance of Gehinnom? Because anyone who's a Torah leader of any generation automatically has to be at least taken past Gehinnom, because they have to see the people inside who really they should have helped, and they should have been a part of rescuing those souls. So when he was taken past Gehinnom, literally briefly going past, and remember this is all envisioned by the Berdichev Rav in his dream, the Apter Rav jumped into Gehinnom. And when he jumped into Gehinnom, obviously there was some surprise there from the inmates, because obviously if you can picture such a thing, although it's not meant to be taken literally, the fires were burning, there were people suffering, and suddenly you have this tzaddik jumping in, and he's completely incongruous. So obviously this caused a bit of a furore among the management, and it got to a higher management level, and the people in charge said, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here." What? He said, "I'm not coming out until I rescue some of the souls from here and take them with me to Shamayim." He said, "What could?" So the one in charge, I'm not sure, the black angel in charge, he said, "What right have you got to come in and start demanding?" He said, "Look, if you don't like it, let's take it to God. Let's take it to the heavenly court, and we'll see what they decide, whether I've got the right to come in and start rescuing lost souls and take them to Shamayim." Okay, so it gets to the heavenly court. What do? God looks, he says, "Look, we'll look at this rabbi's book. Let's look at what he's done in his life. If he's virtuous, if he's worthy of rescuing people, then we'll let him do it. But if he has any taint, any wrongdoing, any lack of integrity or honesty, then we won't let him do it." So God, as it were, looks through the book from the beginning of his life to the end of his life, can find not one trace of dishonesty. Completely honest, 100%. No leaving school early, no telling lies to the milkman, "I'll pay you next week when you don't have any money." No, he didn't pull a sickie. What he said is what he did, 100%. So God, as it were, had his quote-unquote hands tied. God said, "Look, you can see this, he's done nothing wrong. Let him do what he needs to do." So they said, okay. So they took him back. He went back to Gehinnom. Now Gehinnom has, without going into too much, it has a number of levels. The top level, the level probably nearest to heaven, is where the least worst cases are. The cases of the people who are going to be in there for a number of months. They get there, the souls are corrected, and they're off to Shamayim. And as you get lower, you get the more hardened cases, and you get lower, and then there's a layer at the bottom called the Tehom. I don't know how you would translate to home. Maybe the abyss might be the best word to describe it. So they take the soul of this Aptarov to the top level and they say, okay, take whoever you need to take. He said, no. I'm not going to take the people at the top. They're going to get out anyway. 12 months and they're finished. I want to go down to the no-hopers, the people who they've got no chance of getting out. They're there for the duration. The people who were just punished for the sake of punishment. And what could they do? They couldn't stop him, so he goes down. And by the way, how did they decide in the heavenly court how many souls he can retrieve and take with him? They looked and they said, he's allowed to take however many souls in accordance with the amount of people that he saved in his lifetime. Because the Aptarov was somebody who saved Jewish people from imprisonment, from any type of, from being captured. In fact, there's a mitzvah called Pidyon Shivuim, saving captives. If there's a Jew who's languishing in a prison cell or whatever, and you have a way of getting him out, whether you're ransoming him or whether you're pulling the right strings and you get them released, it's a great mitzvah. It's one of the greatest mitzvahs. So they looked, and they'd already checked how many souls, how many people he'd saved in his lifetime. It was 220. So they said, help yourself, take 220 people. So he goes down, he rounds them all up, and he comes up to the entrance and says, okay, I'm ready now, I'm ready to go. Okay, let's take a tally. How many have you taken? They count up, 440 people he had with him. I said, what is this? You've already been told, it says there on the docket, you can only go out with 220. Why have you taken double? So he said to them the following thing. He said, God took my life in the prime of my life. My entire life I spent rescuing Jews, saving them. And God took me in while I was in the middle of this job. If I would have lived another however many years, I would have saved more. So how can you restrict me to what I did in my lifetime? You can see I died early. I died very young, relatively. So again, they went to God, and God said, look, because it's true, he would, if I would have given him his lifetime that he should have lived a natural lifetime, he would have saved more. So therefore, let him take out the 440 souls, and that's exactly what he did in this whole dream. And there's a little bit more to the story, but I won't go into it now because I can see it's already freaked you out a little bit. But what's the point of the story? The point of the story is, how come this rabbi, the Aptarov, had virtually carte blanche to do what he wanted in the depths of Gehenna? And the answer is because he lived a life of integrity and a life of utmost honor and honorability. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Without talking about stories from the past, I'm sure there are plenty of stories we know about our fellow Jews who've done acts that are incredible, that have been very inspirational. So I want to bring you a couple of short stories that happened within my family. So I've got my own frame of reference. I can only talk with any authority about incidents that happened close to me that I heard directly about the people concerned. First, I'm going to tell you very briefly what it says in the Gemara of Bava Metzia, Daf. I think it's Mem Chet Amud Aleph. Daf Mem Chet. Yes, that's right, Mem Chet, because it spells Moach. Moach means brain. You need to use your brain. You need to use your seichel for honesty. By the way, there was a rabbi who once said that, Rabbi Moskovitz from Israel, he once said you should use any means to remember page references in the Talmud. So he says there's a Gemara which talks about a cow that gores, You know this whole thing, if it causes damage. And you look in the Gemara, what page is it on? Daf Mem Vav. What does Mem Vav spell? Moo. What a better way to remember about a cow than that page reference. So anyway, the Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Mem Chet Amud Aleph, says that in truth, if a person makes a deal with another person, he has a business deal, and he puts down a deposit, and he says, look, this is my deposit, don't spend the money now, it's my deposit. Whenever the goods become available, then keep my deposit and I'll pay you the balance. So, in other words, it's not just a business deal that's made verbally, it's made with money. And then, before the actual deal is done, before the goods pass to the buyer changes his mind. Let's say the goods have gone down in value, so the buyer decides to renege. He says, you know what, I bought it at a high price, I arranged a deal at a high price, now the market's crashed, now the goods are worth not even 10% of what I bought them for, why should I go through with the deal? I want my money back. Or the other way around, let's say the seller sells something for £100, and now the market increases, and now the goods are worth £300. So he says, sorry, no deal, I'm going to give you your money back. Technically, according to the strict letter of the law, that will be permissible. There's no comeback, there's no sin. However, somebody who does that invokes the rebuke of the sages. What does that mean? It means the sages said in their wisdom, the sages of the Mishnah said, and I quote, Mi Shepora, the one who took retribution from the generation of the flood, from the generation of the Tower of Babel, from the Egyptians in the sea, and even before that from the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, may he take retribution for somebody who goes back on his word. That's the rebuke, the strong rebuke that the sages give. So technically, okay, you have done nothing wrong according to the Torah. But it's not nice if you do that. It's not nice. It's not menschlich. It's not ehrlich to do that. So the sages are very displeased, and they coined this phrase, mishapara, meaning he who took retribution, who took the payback, as it were. Okay, obviously that refers to God. So they're saying, look, you haven't done a good thing in the eyes of God. Now that applies when there's money involved, when the deal was sealed with money. What about if somebody makes a deal just with words? An oral deal, verbal deal? The Gemara agrees. It doesn't invoke this rebuke of the sages. However, the sages are still displeased with such a person. You may think, look, I made a deal with somebody, I made a mistake. Okay, I shook hands on it, or I agreed with him over the telephone or in person, and we agreed that the money should change hands at some point. But look, everyone makes mistakes. So what can I do? So I'm going to go back on my deal. Okay. There's not going to be any, he can't take you to court. It's not on paper. But at least you've got to look. You're invoking the displeasure of the rabbis, and that is something you have to live with. That's something, and that's how strong it's put in the Gemara. So it's something to bear in mind. I'm going to tell you these couple of stories. The first story is about my grandfather. He died when I was 5 years old. I remember him very minimally. And this certainly did happen when I remember him. And I heard it from somebody who was there himself, an elderly man who told me that this happened when he was about 10 years old. So he said, this fellow told me he was with his father, and his father had a business dealing with my late grandfather. So my late grandfather used to deal in fabrics, and you steal animal skins. Nowadays, I'm not sure if you can make a big business selling animal skins and furs and things like that, because it's not really politically correct for many, many reasons. But in those days, it was the norm. So my grandfather, Olav Sholem, was a wholesaler, and he sold an entire, nowadays you would say a 20-foot container, a lorry. Those days it was a wagon. He sold a wagon full of untreated raw animal skins in one go, whatever price it was, and it sold to this fellow who told me this story, his father. And his father slapped the little boy with him. You know, you take your son to work sometimes if he's off school. So the deal was done, the money was paid, and this fellow's father took the wagon home. And by the time the wagon got home and it was being unloaded into the warehouse, the doors of the wagon were opened, and out from that wagon came the most dreadful stench, the most horrible smell. What had happened? All the skins in that wagon, by the time they'd been delivered, were all gone off, they'd all gone rotten, and basically the goods were unusable. So now what did this fellow do? He said he went back to my grandfather with his son, who was telling me the story, and he said to him, Mr. Kalati, he said, the goods are unusable. I paid for goods that were good, that were correct, that were saleable. I can't sell these. So apparently my grandfather took one look, opened the thing, probably smelt the horrible smell. He thought, well, this fellow's right. Took out his checkbook on the spot, wrote him a check, gave him the money back. No questions asked. Finished. The fellow who told me the story told me, he said, I looked up at my father, and my father was absolutely dumbstruck. He said to me, he pointed at my grandfather and said, that is an honest Jew, or the equivalent in Arabic. Now, you might think, wow, it's a nice story, very... But this was the norm in those days. People used to act with incredible integrity. Their word was their bond. And on a side note, my late uncle, who was the son of my grandfather, was reputable that if he ever made a deal with somebody and he made a mistake in the price, whether it was to his benefit or whether he would lose money over the deal, he would stand by the deal. And I met people who had dealt with him, and who told me, you know, your grandfather sold me goods half the price. You made a mistake. You wrote down the wrong. He never changed his mind. A few times he did it with me, and the people who had dealt with him on this basis used to come back even after he'd passed away, because they knew they were dealing with a company that is built on honesty and integrity. The second story is about somebody on my other side of the family, my mother's, who married into my mother's side of the family, who passed away about 2 years ago, my uncle. And this was told to me by his son, my cousin, at the Shiva house. He said his late father once had a business dealing with a certain fellow who had passed away. He did the business deal, and subsequently the fellow passed away, and the widow came back a while later to my uncle, and she said to my uncle, I have paperwork here that says you did a business dealing with my late husband, and you still owe him the money because you bought this, whatever it is, consignment from him. He gave it to you. You still owe the money. Now my uncle that deal had already been done. The goods were bought and he paid for the goods. So it was all done. But there was nothing on paper. And this widow had no idea that my uncle already paid the money. So what did my uncle do? What would you do in such a situation? You would say, look, lady, I'm really sorry. I'm very sorry about your loss, however many weeks or months ago it was. I was really sorry. But you have to understand, I paid for that. I took the goods, I agree, I paid for it. He didn't even open his mouth. He paid the amount of money again, the second time. Why did he do that? He didn't have to do that. He didn't even have to argue with her. He could have just reasoned with her. He didn't want to go through that. This is a woman. She'd obviously, within a year that she'd lost her husband, she's a very sensitive person. Why should he enter down that route? He'd rather pay the money again from scratch, and he wasn't necessarily a man of means, certainly not at the time. But that was a way that he went beyond the letter of the law. So many times, people are happy enough, people are content enough to go by the letter of the law, which is good. It's already a level. Already, if you're not cheating somebody, that's some type of level. Fine. But there's something called lifnim mishurat hadin, to go beyond the letter of the law. Yeah? You're not demanded to go down that road. You don't have to. Nobody's forcing you. The Torah isn't saying you must go beyond what we told you. No. It's just for you. It's for your choice. That's why the reward for your choice is so much greater than just living by the rule book. So when a person goes beyond the letter of the law, that's where you really get your brownie points. And this is really a level that every Jew should be aiming for in his life as many times as he can. To go beyond. Don't just be a job's worth. That's what we call it in the UK. Being a job's worth. Starting at 9, leaving at 5. Sometimes your job demands you to be a bit longer. Sometimes you're in the middle of something. And if you don't finish that thing and leave it, let's say 5:30, you'll have to come back tomorrow and start the whole thing again, and you'll spend much more time. So the person has to act with conscientiousness. Even if your boss is not going to appreciate you with a small b, boss with a small b, but the boss with a capital B, he's going to appreciate it. He's going to say, there is a conscientious person. There is a person who makes me happy, who gives me nachas, says God. He gives me nachas because he's living life the way I want him to live. Not just by the rules and the rule book, and he's pushing forward for the right. He's using the 5th section of the Shulchan Aruch. There are 4 parts of the Shulchan Aruch. Yeah? Even HaEzer, Choshen Mishpat, Orach Chaim, Yoreh De'ah. What's the last part? The fictional part? It's called common sense. It's called Seichel. Use your common sense. Go beyond, step beyond that limit, and there you really earn your brownie points. Now, the temple was destroyed once, rebuilt, destroyed again. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But why did we have 2 temples destroyed? These temples were the center of our existence. They were central to our Avodat Hashem, how we serve God. They were the fulcrum of how a Jew is supposed to be. Not just for the Jews, it was also for the non-Jews. Because non-Jews also came to the temple to bring sacrifices. So it was a worldwide thing. It was universally beneficial. Why did we lose them? So we are told the first temple was destroyed because of 3 cardinal sins: immorality, idol worship, and murder. The 3 biggies. You can't get worse than those. We're told you're supposed to give your life rather than succumb to any one of these 3. They're called cardinal sins. Cardinal, like the big guy in Italy. The cardinal. If somebody tells you, kill him or I'll kill you, yeah? Here's the gun. Actually, maybe he wouldn't give you the gun because you'll just shoot him. But, okay, he'll tell you, look, I'm putting the gun in your hand, I'm pointing in the right direction, pull the trigger, or I've got a gun aimed at your head, I'm going to kill you. You have to say, sorry, no deal. You have to kill me. Somebody says to you, commit this immorality, marry this woman you're not supposed to marry, or else I'll kill you. You have to be killed. And the same thing with idolatry. We know this from the story of Purim. Mordechai the Jew, who was the exemplary Jew, would rather give his life than bow down to Haman. Because Haman, first of all, he set himself up like a deity. But more than that, he carried a little miniature idol, a little miniature iPhone or iPad. He had a mini iPad in his pocket. Yeah, that was his Avodah Zorah. He had a little. So anyone who would bow down to him would automatically be bowing down to the idolatry. So you're like, Mordechai didn't want to do that. I would never bow down. I would rather give my life So he put his life on the line rather than commit idolatry. So the Jews in the times of the first temple, they willfully did all these three sins. That's why God destroyed the first temple. The second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. Now what does baseless hatred mean? Does it mean that you're upset with somebody because he was nasty to you? No, not necessarily. It's talking about the hatred of somebody just because he is who he is. I don't like you because I'm from Golders Green and you're from Edgware. I don't mix with people from Edgware. They're lowlifes. They live in the sticks. They only just got running water recently. You look at them as, you're not in my clique. So therefore, I haven't got the time for you. And if you need help, go get one of your own to help you. I'm not helping you. That's not achdut, that's not unity. That's disparity. That's what destroyed the second temple. But you can narrow down these sins into two groups. The first group, immorality, idolatry, and murder. Those things come down to what we call bittul Torah. That means lacking learning of Torah, or wasting time doing things which are not Torah. Why is that equivalent to these three cardinal sins? On a simple level, somebody who commits these three sins is busy doing those three sins. They haven't got time to sit down and learn Torah. They're wasting time killing people, doing whatever they're doing. They haven't got time to sit down and do what's right, what they're supposed to be doing. So therefore that's called a lack of Torah. Now Torah is compared to emet, the truth. So if you lack Torah in your lifetime, you're not living a Torah lifestyle, you are edging away from the truth. So really the first temple was destroyed because a lack of people being true to themselves. Second temple is a little bit easier to understand. When you hate your fellow Jew, or you dislike them, you don't want to include them, you make a distance between you and your fellow Jew. That's called lack of shalom, lack of peace. You're not forging peaceful relations with your fellow man. So therefore that's a lack of shalom. So the two temples were destroyed for these two main things. No truth and no peace. That's what wreaks havoc and wreaks destruction. And there's a proof for that. Anybody who's read the Megillah called Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, will note, we as Sephardim, by the way, we read this every Friday night, and we read it on the night of Pesach as well. I believe Ashkenazim also read it on the night of Pesach, at the end, right at the end of the Seder. But we read it every Friday night. In the fourth chapter of Shir HaShirim, which is written by King Solomon, it says three words which hint to this lacking that brought about such a terrible destruction. Iti miLevanon tavoi. What does it mean, Lebanon? Is it iti means to me, miLevanon, from Lebanon tavoi shall come. What is Lebanon? Lebanon is Lebanon. What do you mean Lebanon? Lebanon next to Israel? With all the people who want to kill us, kill the Jews? Is that what we're talking about in the Song of Songs? So Lebanon refers to the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. Yeah, and there's proof of this because the Aramaic translation of the word Lebanon translates to, I can't remember the exact word, but the word that means the temple in Aramaic. So if Lebanon means the temple, if you take these three words, iti miLevanon tavoi, and you take the first letters, iti aleph miLevanon mem tavoi taf, spells emet, spells truth. You want the third temple, you've got to live a life of truthfulness, of great care in our dealings with our fellow man, not just a fellow Jew, with anybody. with anyone who's a Tselem Elokim, who has the image of God, which basically is every single human being. It doesn't mean we've got to be more careful with our fellow Jew and less careful with the non-Jews or Gentiles. It means, I would say it almost means the opposite. You've got to take as much care, or even more care, in our dealings with non-Jews, because that could cause irreparable damage, namely Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name, which is diametrically opposed to the purpose of being in this world. Because we're all here for a reason. Why? On a general basis, we're here to bring God's name up from the doldrums, because God's name isn't resplendent in this world. It's being pushed down, it's being ignored, it's being bypassed. We're supposed to bring God's name and make it apparent and clear in this world. And if we're coming and abusing God's name and pushing him down, then what's the point of being here? Not only are you not doing what you're supposed to do, you're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do. So what reason has God got to keep us in this world? That's why it's such a terrible sin. So we see there's a tremendous responsibility on all of us to keep good relations with each other in terms of honesty, integrity, and just basically being a mensch. It's not rocket science. It's something you've got to build up every day. I'm going to finish by talking about how the two temples were destroyed, why it actually came to this, what was the precursor for this. I'm talking about even before the Jews did these sins. And then going to finish off with an amazing story, which actually has nothing to do with what I've been talking about so far, but it's a cute story and you'll like it when you hear it. Okay. So we know there was a wicked person called Esav, who had a very frum brother called Yaakov. Now, Yaakov went to take the blessings from his father Isaac in a way that was a little bit, he didn't steal the blessings, he took them in a way that wasn't, it was, in Yiddish they call it nishkan glat. It wasn't really wasn't 100%. Of course the blessings were coming to Jacob. They was always supposed to go to Jacob, but he took them in a way that wasn't, it was a bit of a roundabout way. And he himself wasn't happy doing it. But he had a mother called Rivka, who told him this is what you have to do. And of course, Jacob, like all good people, listened to his mother. And he would also listen to his father. There's another thing that's very often forgotten in our generation. I'm sure we know. People here are of an older generation than me, not that much older, but a little bit older than me. But I'm sure we can relate to some younger people who may not have as much honor for their elders as we had in our generation and previous. But that's for another discussion. But Jacob was a good boy, he listened to his mother, despite his own thinking and despite his better judgment, as it were. So he went in, he took the blessings from his father in this surreptitious way. Next thing we know, Esav is coming in to get the brachot. Now, Jacob had already done this switcheroo, has already portrayed himself as his brother. So Esav comes in not knowing any of this, and in fact we're told that there was some type of swinging door where Isaac, the father, was living, and as Jacob was coming out of the door, Esav was coming in, and they missed each other by a hair's breadth. Had it happened a millisecond earlier, Esav would have seen his brother Yaakov, would have said, "What are you doing here?" Got out his knife, boom, that's it, no Jewish people. It doesn't warrant thinking about. But that didn't happen, it was a microsecond away. So now Esav comes in, and he says, "Father, I'm here, I've got your meat, I've prepared your food, let's get on with the blessing." So now Isaac was scared. He said, "No, I've already given the blessing away. Your brother came and took it through Mirma." Mirma, the Torah says Mirma. It's a word which means, I think Rashi says, chokhmah. He took it through wisdom. He was clever. He was not sly, but clever. Chokhmah. Okay, so now Esav, the wicked Russia, feels a little bit hard done by. So what does he do? Uncharacteristically, he starts crying. And we are told that he cried 2 tears that fell from his eyes. One from his left eye, sorry, that's my left eye, and one from his right eye. And a 3rd tear, he started to flow from his eye, but never actually fell from his eye. And we are told something very frightening. The first tear that fell from his eye was how the first temple was destroyed. Because of that pain that he experienced, God destroyed the first temple. The 2nd tear was for the 2nd temple. The 3rd tear that was suspended, that was going to drop, that tear, if that would have fallen to the ground, we would have lost the 3rd temple, and oy vey. That also doesn't warrant thinking about. So what is all this? Now, we might learn this at school, or we might learn this in a shir and hear it, and it's very nice. Well, it's not very nice, actually, it's very horrible. But we might accept this and say, wow, how powerful those tears were. But I've told this over several times, and I told this over at my Shabbat table this Shabbat to my wife and my kids and guests, whatever. And my wife pointed out a very important point which never occurred to me. And it's so obvious. Think about it. Esav was so bad. He was what you'd call bad to the bone. He committed all those 3 sins by the time he was 15. He killed, he did adultery, he served idolatry, no problem. Not like a couple of years after his bar mitzvah. Yeah? So that's how bad he was. And he kept doing it. He, of all people, cries a total of 2 tears. That's more than we do when we go and see a romantic comedy in the film, in the cinema, if ever we do such a thing, which I don't necessarily advise. You'd read a sad book. You'd cry 50 tears. He cried 2 tears, and there's 2 temples destroyed, and thousands of Jews were destroyed, killed at the time. How come? From such a Russia? It's a good point. And my wife added another point. She said, what about all the Jews who cried for the temple not to be destroyed? What about all the people who are crying now, as we speak, for the rebuilding of this 3rd temple? Why haven't we got that? Why did God accept his 2 tears and billions of Jewish tears cried to no avail? Good question, no? Good question. So I thought about it, and I thought of one answer, it came to me, and I thought it was okay. I told her anyway, and it kept her happy a little bit. And it was like this. You've got to understand that the Jewish people at the times of these 2 temples were in a very bad way. I already told you, 3 cardinal sins, baseless hatred. You've got to be in a bad way. So there were 2 options that were open to God, as it were. One option was kill all the Jews. The second option was take out the anger, as it were, not on the Jews, but on the wood and stone of the temple. So in other words, God actually chose the second option, the lighter evil. So Hashem's anger, which he had to be displayed in this world, was redirected from, God forbid, falling onto the Jewish people and then being decimated, to being just on the temple. And of course there were Jews who died within the temple, but it wasn't nearly as bad of a carnage that it would have been if all the Jewish people, God forbid, would have been wiped out. So it was, to coin a phrase, the lesser of the 2 evils. Obviously, nothing that comes from God is truly evil. But it was the lesser of the 2 situations. It was our fallback position. So really, it wasn't as bad as, in fact, in a way, Esav did us a favor, because he cried and God took out his anger on the Beit HaMikdash. In a way, he was doing us a favor. That was my own thought. But I wasn't entirely happy. I thought there must be a better answer. So it was on Friday night. I went to bed, and I was thinking, and it hit me. It hit me. And I quickly got up. I was so excited. I said, I think I want an answer for you. And I'm not sure if this answer is said anywhere else. I'd be very honored if it was somebody else said this. Then I could say it was his idea, and I got it from him in some sort of metaphysical way. But anyway, this is the answer that I came up with. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it anyway, just for the record. Look at Avram Avinu, Abraham. What was his greatest test? He had 10 tests. In fact, according to one opinion, he had another test as well, an 11th test. What was his greatest test? Arguably correct, it was the Akedah, when he had his son on the altar. Now, by the way, you know, the Muslims say that it wasn't Isaac who was bound to the altar, it was actually Ishmael who was bound to the altar. And they've got a proof for it. They say, look, you look no further than the name of the binding of Isaac. It was called the Al-Qaeda. Just checking if you're still awake. But joking aside, that was arguably, in fact there's nobody argues with this, the greatest test of Abraham was when he bound his son to the altar and he put the knife to his neck and was going to kill him. But I ask you a simple question. Why? What was Abraham's first test? I think some people say it's his second test. He jumped into the fire. There was a big furnace. He took a dive right into the fire. He didn't know if he was going to survive or not. Odds are that he's going to go in there. He would have been frazzled. No, he survived. But he gave his life, his own life. Why was that not the hardest test? What about throwing out his own son Ishmael and his concubine Hagar? Throwing them out with a little bit of water, leave my house, never to return. Why wasn't that his hardest test? There was 2 people he got rid of. This is just one. And we're told he loved Ishmael, maybe not as much as, maybe he did love as much as Isaac, but Ishmael was his son. He had to throw his son and his concubine out of the house. Why was the binding of Isaac his greatest test? And I'll tell you an idea which I actually heard before, but I will apply it to this thing about Esau. What was Avram Avinu all about? He was all about chesed, about loving kindness, about giving to other people, about enriching people's lives, and in fact saving people's lives. They said about Abraham that he was the one who she'asu nefesh b'Haran. He made souls in Haran. What do you mean he made souls? He was the father of millions of people. The answer is yes. Because the people he brought back to worship of Hashem, it was like it was considered as if he gave birth to them. So he sustained millions of people. He breathed life into millions of people. Now he was told, forget about that. Take a knife and stab somebody. Cut his throat. Not just anybody. I'm not talking about going and taking Nimrod, who was a big evil person at the time, cutting his throat. No. What about the 4 kings and the 5 kings? Can I cut their throat? No. As if that wasn't bad enough, he had to commit murder. Not just any person, but somebody who was his heir. The son that he was told, all the Jews are going to come from this person. Go and kill him. What did he do? He didn't say, oh God, come on. Can we just talk about this? Let's sit down, have a coffee, maybe come to some arrangement. Maybe I can take somebody else's life. Maybe I can, I can teach him about death. I can give him a nice share. No, he didn't even open his mouth. Vayashkem Avram baboker. He got up in the morning, he got on with what he had to do. And we are told, and this is unbelievable, I still to this day, I've told this so many times, I still can't understand it. We are told that he walked his son Isaac to the Akedah in the same way that a father walks his son to the chuppah, with the same joy. Can you imagine such a thing? Diametrically opposed to his whole life's purpose, to kill somebody. Not a shred of doubt. Going back to Esau. What was Esau's life's purpose? Not his life's purpose. What did he choose as a lifestyle? Killing, raping, serving idols, all the things that not such a nice Jewish boy would do. That was his lifestyle. Spirituality, worship of God, being a good person, no. That's not for me, said Esau. I'm all about the hunt. I'm all about getting what's in it for me. That's what I'm about. Suddenly, he gets to, I believe he was 63 years old. A life of debauchery. Now, he starts crying. What's he crying about? He's crying about because he missed raping a betrothed maiden in the forest. Is he crying that he missed a bank heist or something? Is he crying because somebody ripped him off? No. He's crying, of all things, you have this Hitler, because Hitler came from Esau, you have this Hitler crying for spirituality, for God. How could you ever imagine such a thing? The most completely opposite from anything you would expect from this Rasha, from this evil person. Suddenly he's crying now, I didn't receive a blessing from my father. Now you have Esau having his own Akedah, as it were. Having his own chance and doing something which is totally against the grain. He's crying for God. One tear, that's all it takes. One tear, the opposite of his whole life's purpose. A Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Second tear, the second one comes down, the second Beit HaMikdash. His tears for spirituality were so great that they caused such a tremendous decimation within Klal Yisrael. Now, what do we learn from such a thing? We learn that if a person goes against his nature and he goes for the right thing, it doesn't matter who you are. You can be, not say you can be an Esau. There can be somebody like an Esau. Nobody in our generation is like Esau. Every Jew has his own virtue. So we can't even compare ourselves anywhere near to Esau. But we might consider ourselves, look, who am I? What are my prayers worth? I've done so many bad things in my life. Why should I? If we turn that around and we go against the grain and we show, I am going to make a difference. I am going to do something that's correct. I am going to do a business deal. I'm going to stick up for the right thing. I'm not going to rip the other guy off. I'm not going to steal and cheat or whatever. I'm going to do the right thing. Who knows whether that thing might be a tear that God takes and gives us tremendous credit. It makes a tremendous difference to the world. We don't know. But chances are, looking at this story, that you are going to get a tremendous reward. And the world is going to be a better place for a person who takes himself out of the box and pushes for something correct. Now let's talk about the third tier, and then I'm going to tell you the story. The third tier didn't fall. Why didn't it fall? He had a good crying thing going. What happened to tier number 3? So one opinion says, you know what? That was just Esau. All he could manage, even though he felt he felt hard done by, all he could manage with 2 measly tears. Not even a third one fell out. That's what a bad guy he was. Okay, that's one answer. The other answer is there was a very specific reason why that third tear didn't fall. Because tears number 1 and 2 were pure emotion. It was sadness. He felt devastated. In Yiddish they call it zerbrochen. He felt a broken person. By the time he cried the third tear, that tear changed from the emotion, changed into anger. He was furious with his brother now. How dare he take my blessings? And that's when he started his murderous rampage against his brother. So you can see here, sometimes in life we can be hard done by. And all we do is we want to cry to Hashem. We've been swindled by this one and that one. I'm talking about now if we're on the other side of the coin. If somebody does us a bad deal, and we can feel so sad, Hashem, why? Please help me. And then suddenly our third tier turns to anger. How dare he do that to me? How dare he rip me off? How dare he not say thank you to me after all I've done for him? I lent him so many things. He couldn't lend me his lawnmower. One thing I asked him, he couldn't do that for me. How do we know how that when we change our emotion to anger, that could be devastating? Whereas it turned out good because Asaph didn't cry his third tear. The third temple was saved. What about if we turn our tears to anger? We might be losing something good. We might be changed. How many times have we met people who they tick us off for some reason? We don't like the look of them. But we say, you know what? Let's give them a chance. And we befriend them. And then suddenly we get very close and we become very good friends. But that could have changed. We could have felt an awkward feeling. We could have felt, and then that we could go with that feeling and suddenly we ignore that person. Now you've lost a friendship. Who knows? Something to think about. I'm going to tell you the story very quick. I've only got a couple of minutes left. Okay. There was once a very special person. His name was Shmuel. And this story, I believe, is a true story. It was maybe 100, 200 years ago. This Shmuel lived in a town that had a non-Jewish mayor. This mayor owned the whole town, all the villages or whatever. And this mayor needed somebody to look after his, to control his money, his fortune, his jewels, whatever. And he looked around, he found nobody more honest and trustworthy than this fellow Shmuel. Because obviously Shmuel was somebody of honesty and integrity. He chose him. He said, you are going to be in charge of of everything. And I'm giving you the key. You're the only key holder to my safe deposit box. It had all my jewels and everything in there. Yeah. Obviously, this wasn't straight away. This must have happened over a while, weeks, months, or whatever. That he built up this trust with this Jewish fellow named Shmuel. So it happened once that this mayor, he threw a great party. He invited all the nobles, all the nobles of the town to this party. Why? Because he wanted to show off his most precious jewel. It was a very large diamond that was priceless, and he kept in his safe. So the Jew Shmuel was present at the party. He was actually an invitee. It wasn't just a paid member of staff. He was also a friend of the family. He was invited to the party as a guest. So in the middle of this party, the mayor got up and he said, Shmuel, I want you to go to the safe and go and bring me my jewel, which was passed down to me from my parents, and from before that my parents' parents. You know the jewel I mean, the one in the gold encrusted box with all the stones in it, with all the precious stones in it. Fine. He goes down, unlocks the safe, brings it back to the party, and then without even opening the box, the mayor takes the stone. He shows everybody the box and the jewels that are all the way around it, and he starts talking about it. It's a family heirloom, and going on and on and on and on, and everyone's there, and then we're all clamoring to take a look at it when he's going to open the box. He opens up the box. He shows everybody an empty box. Everyone's going, and he said, what are you talking about? The mayor turns it open. Oh my gosh, it's not in there. So immediately all eyes turn to the Jew. And now the mayor knows the Jew is the only key holder. What has happened? He turns around to Shmuel. Shmuel is shocked. And the mayor takes Shmuel to one side. And already the people who were looking at, all the guests there, they're thinking it must be him. And some of them were even saying, it's a Jew, he must have stolen it. He should be hanged. Jews are never trustworthy. Anyway, the mayor takes the Jew, puts his arm around him and says, look, Shmuel, you've served me well over these many years. You're the only person who's got the key. I don't want to believe it's you, but I'm sure that your lust for money overtook you and you just took the jewel. I'm not going to talk about stealing it. I'm going to tell you, look, I'll tell you, because of your service and you've been trustworthy, I'll allow you to just return back the jewel and I won't punish you. And we'll call it quits. Shmuel looks at him and he says, God forbid I should ever take such a thing. You have to believe me. It wasn't me. But I can see that the evidence, the circumstantial evidence pointed that it's me. But I believe it was not me, and I've got a feeling that the thief is here in this house. So give me half an hour to prove my innocence. Please, I beg you. The mayor says, okay. Shmuel runs home, comes back in half an hour, and before that he tells the mayor, don't let anybody leave the house. Keep everybody there. Comes back. When Shmuel comes back, he sees all the people assembled there. He takes out of a box, a large box, he pulls out a black rooster. Everyone's looking, what is this chicken doing? What's he going to do with that? He says, ladies and gentlemen, I've been accused of this crime. And I fully believe that the person who stole that jewel is in this room right here, right now. So I bought this black rooster. This is a special black rooster. It's got endowed with special powers. If there's a person who's honest and he never stole, or he's not a thief, if he touches the rooster, nothing will happen. But woe betide the person who's the thief. If he touches this rooster, the rooster will go crazy. He'll be crowing and and you'll hear he'll be flapping his wings, and we'll definitely know who the thief is. So I'm asking everybody, I want you all to step forward, place your right hand on the black rooster, and we're going to find out who it is. So they all think he's mad, but they do what he says. They all put their hand, everyone's going through, and they get to the very last person. Puts his hand on the rooster, nothing happens. Not a cluck. So now they're all looking at him, what is this joke you're doing? You're making fools of us. Shmuel says, no, I have my answer already. I want everybody in this room to raise up their right hand. So they'll put up their right hand, and he says, look, you'll see everybody has a black mark on their hand, because I covered this is a regular rooster, and I covered it in black soot. So everyone has a black mark, except for that person. He points to somebody, his hand was white. He said, he's the thief. Because he's the one who didn't want to, who was scared that if he knew he was the thief, if he would put his hand on the rooster, he would have started crowing. So he's the one. And then of course, the mayor knew who the thief was, and they found out who he was. What happened? He'd copied the keys and he'd gone, he'd taken it out, he wanted the Jew to get the blame, etc. Because he was another servant who worked in the house. Therefore, the mayor realized the incredible honesty and integrity of that Jew, and he reinstated the fellow, and of course he did what he did to the thief. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say, I hope I haven't pushed this message too far, but I want to leave you with this thought, that whenever we think of ourselves, we can always do something more. We can always take something and make it better. No matter how insignificant we think it is, we can always take that thing and sharpen it and make it that little bit better. So I think it's worthwhile. We should all take a few minutes, think of one thing that we do good, that we're proud of, and make that thing better, and make it our life's purpose to continue this mitzvah. And please God, we should all see that moment when all those tears that all the Jewish people cry for the third Beit HaMikdash, when that moment will come true, and we'll see the Bayit Shlishi may happen speedily in our times. Amen v'amen. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening.